Okay, thank you very much, Pogon, for inviting Res Artis to speak. And with the mic, yeah? Okay, good morning. Is it up there? No, not yet. Let's start. I'll just talk a little bit. It's a great opportunity for us artists to be here and to get an idea of what the artist residency field in Croatia is dealing with in terms of circumstances and support and need. And I have the chance to talk about social impact today for 10 minutes, which is obviously not enough because it's a highly complex matter. But we took the chance anyway because it's something that we see is becoming a pressing issue in our network, to actually talk about local impact and to create local impact. And local impact simply very often means social impact within the residency field. So the two are almost congruent, local impact and social impact. Whereas you could also say social impact is a subcategory of local impact, because you can have political impact with residencies as well. And what I'd like to do in these 10 minutes is to share a few observations with you that come from our network. And we have by no means done any research on social impact. You can say it's really the first time that we dare to talk about it, but it is important. And I will give you a few examples also of kind of the radical end of what residencies can do in terms of social and political goals they can achieve. Then I'll talk a few minutes about who is really, apart from the field, who is interested in this idea of social impact of the artist residency field. And then a few sentences I will share with you about how to actually assess it, how to measure it. So highly ambitious, 10 minutes, and I'm really just going to touch the topic, but oh, yeah. So what we found out that a really large number of our members feel that they create social impact. Oh, is it running on a? Is this on automated speed or something? Slide? Or can I? Is it hand? Because I wouldn't. Sorry. Yeah. It seemed to go on its own. Okay. So 90%, huge number, and that obviously involves a lot of different levels of social impact, different ways of doing it, and we have not assessed that in detail, but it just shows a trend that for us is a sign it's worthwhile to dig deeper into this. So when looking at these different strategies of ways of trying to affect your environment through a residency, I came up or could see that there are about 3 levels that I could make out. And I would say that a residency is per se, is a cultural practice that has per se a strong local impact. It is a physical manifestation of a place that communicates openness, tolerance, and for others, for foreigners, for other social groups. So it's almost, you could say it's a social practice in itself, but first of all on a relatively unconscious level, and these 3 levels are also showing a sort of development, historical development within the artist residency field, where we can see that, and now we get to the second level, that artist residency programs become more conscious about their effect on the local environment. So they start to write programs that really ask specific things from their residents to infiltrate that environment, bring it back into the organization, or leave it out there, but really give a new twist to the idea of reciprocity. That is the base of all artist residency programs, that you offer something to your resident, be it an artist or a researcher or another cultural worker, and you expect something back. And that's first of all the time of that person to come and work at your place. That was traditionally a piece of art, but that is kind of outgrowing, the field is outgrowing this very direct way of almost, you could say almost financial exchange. Now it's more the values that we exchange are more of a social kind. So what's happening is that programs ask the residents more often to do either research outside of the organization or go to schools and give workshops to kids or give language courses to the elderly. A lot of social activities are now built into a place that formerly was specifically targeted at artistic production. And now the artist's role is changing in society. It's becoming a more social role. And you can see that in the residency field. Now, there are residencies that take that to an extreme and use the whole infrastructure, and more actually do that. It's very fascinating to observe. Use the whole infrastructure of a residency, which has also a lot of communicative and public aspects to it. Understand that role and use it to create new communities, to invite them in, but also reach out to really affect the wider environment and connect. I mean, what I didn't mention so far is that there is a local social aspect to residencies, but there's also an international social aspect, which is very important, of course, to a lot of regions to actually access a wider clientele, audience, and to just reinforce their own strength. And I'm now looking at a few examples. I want to show you a few examples from our network where residencies really use the structure of the residency to achieve another goal. So in this case, we have Arna in Sweden, who is inviting mainly researchers in to look at the biosphere around the residency, because they have the goal to make sure that this becomes a UNESCO site. So they have a very clear goal, and they use the residency as a tool to achieve that goal. And you can see, it's always interesting to see who's supporting that, of course, who is also benefiting from that specific goal that the residency defines. And that's also the best strategy to think about your own support, that you actually, when you define your own goal, you think of all the other organizations and even other sectors, of course, who might share that very goal with you, so you can pool resources and interests. Another example is in Egypt, where an artist just didn't accept the fact that he's cut off from the world, so to speak. So he went to his mother's house and turned it into a residency place in an informal part of Cairo, and did that very successfully because he always had the wisdom to involve international artists, international funders into this programming from the start, and did so very successfully. And he always had to make sure that the Ministry of Culture does not know about his success, because otherwise they would have come and probably interrogated him, closed the residency down for half a year. And it's just, it would never have been such a success. And he's very well known in Europe. He's now in a project of the European Culture Foundation. And I mean, that's important. It's important to open up your very local environment to the world. And you can do that through a residency. And a lot of people benefit, not just yourself. So that's not wrong to care about your own interests, because you can involve others, and that's a great, oh, this doesn't look good. This is actually, I have to read this now. Wow, that looks very strange. This is a very interesting project in the Western Sahara territories that is organized by what happened in the Sahara Western territories, that a part of the population that lived there got occupied by was occupied by oh sorry, I didn't take this, by the Moroccan government years and years ago. It's a very complex colonial and post-colonial history. But what happened that a few years back, the Ministry of Culture of Sevilla, together with other supporters, decided to start a residency program within that population. And it's part of a bigger festival that takes place there as well. And it's just very clever in the way it creates attention and awareness in the world, because a lot of journalists and the media come in as well and go into these residency programs and learn about the population who had to give up the human right to move. I mean, they're stuck there in this part of the Western Sahara territories. They lost their right. They're occupied, simply. I mean, like in a lot of other places in the world as well. But here, a residency really tries to raise awareness to the outside world. And if you ask me, is it successful? I just spoke to an artist, is actually the initiator of this residency, and he thinks it gives the people there a lot of self-esteem, because they know they're not alone. People come in from the world, they're not secluded in the same way anymore. They have very interesting exchanges. They're being taught a lot of different artistic practices through these residents. I mean, they're still occupied, but their life is definitely a better life. So maybe that is the limit of a residency, what it can do. If you want to take it a step further, you have to collaborate with another sector, the political sector. Yeah. There's of course other political residencies, like residencies that work with refugee artists, that have to have a very specific knowledge in terms of how you, first of all, get a person out of a country, then into your country, and then make sure that a traumatized person can actually stabilize her or himself within your residency. So you need a network of people from other sectors, like the health sector. Maybe you need psychological partners from the psychological help. You might need legal services that support you. It's a very specific type of residency, and some do that only temporary. They accept one refugee artist within a larger program of non-refugee artists. Some do only that. And this example, Icon, is also in Sweden, located in Sweden, is working with cities that have safe hubs or shelter initiatives. That some of them are residencies, some of them are not residencies. And this is another type where residencies are being used to revitalize an area, which is probably very often the case, that you're placed strategically. That can be an initiative of the public sector or the cultural sector itself to say, we want to make sure that this area is populated again, and we decide how. That's why we place a residency program there, and we connect it with maybe a city that is 2.5 hours away. Like in this case, Tokyo is 2.5 hours away, and all the young people moved away from a very beautiful island, and there's a triennale that brings people in, but obviously they also leave again. So now the curators and the organizers started to create residency programs so that there would always be people on the spot, and it's actually very successful. I just met the curator in Australia, and it was quite impressive. Obviously, whenever you see that a program can continue well and build up, you see that they're well connected locally with different players. outside and inside the cultural sector, that they have good connections to the public sector, that they might have a private sector sponsor from the corporate world. So it's always, the greater your network is, the more stable you are, the more impact you can have. So now a few things. This interest. I think it is a development in the whole cultural sector that we are just waking up to our own truth, that the cultural field has an enormous potential to stabilize societies. It always has done it, but the more conscious we are of it, the more effective we can be. And this seems to happen very clearly in the residency field. So there is a great interest in the field to know what we're actually affecting, to know our impact. Then there's an interest from the funders' side, who of course want to know where they put their money and what's coming out on the other end. They're always very impatient about this. Then there's the public sector, who seems to close in on us. I feel like there's a lot of pressure, and I've just talked to someone from Taiwan, and she has been addressed. She's one of the leading residencies, or running one of the leading residencies in Taiwan, and she's been addressed by the Ministry of Culture in Taiwan to actually rate her peers, to actually tell the Ministry of Culture between 1 and 10, where would you say is this residency? You know, in the measurement scale, where would you put it? I mean, that's just an outrage. You know, that's just not. You have to stop. That's kind of the limit. That's where you say, no way. You know, it's not my role, and that's not how you can assess residencies. So how do you assess them? We just had this discussion because we started up a network in Melbourne, an Asia, Australia, European exchange network. So we had a lot of different views on what is happening, where's the pressure coming from when we discuss social impact. And we ended up feeling that, you know, the field has to have a very strong voice in saying we're not gonna get pressured by you, Ministry of Culture, to just give you quick answers. What's a good residence, what not? There's no way that you can say this is a good one, this is a bad one. It's such a culturally specific practice. But what is important is that there is a quality measurement possible within the field. So we felt there is something like self-assessment must be possible, which means every single residency has to know their values and their goals. And then you can self-assess. You can see at the end of the year or in 2 years or so, have I reached my goals? Are my values still in place? So that's important, and that you can answer back to whoever comes up and says, so how do you assess your work? That's the answer, I self-assess. And we don't want to close down on the variety because that's the richness of our practice. Okay, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. And I hope it wasn't too erratic. So, I think I have to make one announcement for later, right? Or can we do that later? We do it later. Okay, thank you very much.